Before we begin the story, please type in the comments where you're watching us from to say hello. Don't forget to like and subscribe to support this channel so we can continue to grow and bring you meaningful stories. On the desk in Zenzel's corner office, Sterling smiled back at her from a silver frame. Zenzel returned the smile to the photograph. Her fingers unconsciously swiped across her smartphone screen, where a countdown clocked the time remaining until the wedding. 23 hours and 58 minutes were left. Tomorrow, at this exact hour, she would officially be Mrs. Sterling Beaumont. That name seemed to fit her as perfectly as if it had been written in the Book of Destiny long ago. To her, Sterling was much more than a simple fiancé. He was the architect of her happiness, the man who had shown up with the blueprints for a perfect future, filling the empty spaces in the heart she had kept locked for so long. Together, they had planned everything, not with empty words, but with real actions. The dream house they were building in the upscale suburbs of Atlanta, Georgia, specifically in the Buckhead area, was already in its final phase. Their honeymoon to Santorini in the Greek Isles was reserved. Even the names of their future children were affectionately written in a small note inside her diary. In a world full of uncertainty, Sterling was the only certainty for Zenzele. He was the answer to the desperate prayers she lifted every night. Her phone vibrated softly, announcing a text from Sterling. "Thinking of you. Head home soon, my future wife." Instant warmth filled Zenzele's heart, and the fatigue accumulated from dealing with figures and proposals all day vanished like magic. This man was her world, a world where the smile never faded. She tidied her desk earlier than usual and shut down her laptop. However, instead of returning directly to her downtown condo, a sweet idea struck her. It would be the final surprise before their sacred union. She decided to cook a beef Wellington. It was that complex dish that Sterling endlessly praised every time they dined at high-end restaurants. This time she wanted to prepare it herself, with her own hands. It would be her tribute of love and the dish that would close out their brilliant life as singles. With a palpitating heart, she stopped by the gourmet section of Whole Foods Market to purchase the best ingredients: premium quality beef tenderloin, fresh cremini mushrooms, and imported puff pastry. She meticulously selected everything, imagining Sterling smiling happily as he tasted the dish. Later, upon arriving at Sterling's bachelor apartment, she immediately began cooking in the kitchen, which was already familiar to her. The aroma of butter and sautéed mushrooms filled the space with the warmth of love. 2 hours later, her masterpiece was finished. The beef Wellington, baked to a perfect golden crust, rested impeccably on the platter. To keep it warm, she carefully stored it in a thermal container and headed to Sterling's current residence, where he was temporarily staying before moving into their nuptial home. In her hand, she carried the extra key that opened the door to their paradise. When she entered, the apartment was dark and silent. Only the city lights filtered faintly through the large living room window. "He must have fallen asleep from the exhaustion of the final wedding preparations," Zenzele murmured to herself, trying to understand. Carefully, so as not to make noise, she set the thermal box on the kitchen island. With silent steps, she headed to the only room whose door was slightly ajar, the master bedroom. What she heard through the narrow crack was not the sound of tired snoring, but the muffled giggle of a woman. It was a light, flirtatious laugh, and what was more terrible, it was painfully familiar. It was the laugh of her personal assistant, Talia. Zenzel's heart seemed to stop. She felt as if all the blood in her body froze and a glacial cold seeped into her bones. For a moment she couldn't move. Her feet seemed nailed to the cold marble floor. She tried to convince herself that she had misheard, that Sterling might be talking on his phone's speaker, but her reason rejected that lie. With violently trembling hands, she pushed the door open wider. The scene that unfolded before her eyes tore her soul to the core. Zenzele's world, which had shone with vibrant colors, instantly turned gray and then shattered without a sound. The man who was supposed to become her husband tomorrow, Sterling, the man whose name she invoked in her prayers, was deeply asleep, completely naked. In his arms, as expected, was someone she knew, It was Talia, the woman who called her boss every day and followed her faithfully, the woman she had trusted to manage her schedule. The immaculate office suit Talia had worn this morning was carelessly thrown over the back of a chair, becoming the silent witness to the vilest betrayal. Talia's familiar sweet perfume now smelled repugnant, like a poison contaminating the air of the room that should have consecrated their sacred love. A knot tightened in Zenzele's throat. It seemed as though hot tears would spring forth at any moment, but a cold, unknown force suddenly took control of her consciousness. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. With stiff movements, like a robot whose emotions have been surgically removed, she pulled the phone from her purse. The phone felt heavy and cold in her still trembling hands. She opened the camera application. The flash fired twice, immortalizing that irrefutable proof in a digital image forever. She didn't stop. Next, she pressed the video recording button. For 10 seconds that felt like an eternity, she recorded the nauseating scene, ensuring the faces of the two deeply sleeping people were clearly framed. Sterling's tranquil, sleeping face was visible. It was the face she always missed, but now that face seemed like the mask of a monster. In the midst of her crumbling world, she reflexively smoothed her disheveled hair, a small, unconscious gesture to protect her trampled pride and hold herself together. Once the evidence was safely stored in her phone's gallery, she turned off the screen, turned around, and retreated silently. Her steps were light, as if her soul had abandoned her body. She closed the bedroom door very slowly, fearing to wake the two vipers resting after biting their owner. She walked past the beef Wellington, which was cooling on the kitchen counter. That meal, cooked with all her heart, now seemed like an offering for the funeral of her feelings. She left the apartment and closed the door behind her, leaving behind not only Sterling, but also the love, the trust, and her future, which was now officially a corpse. Zenzele did not sleep a wink all night. She sat on the sofa in her own condo, staring intently at the window that reflected the vibrant nighttime view of Atlanta. Her mind was empty, and her chest was hollow. But with the sunrise awakening the city, something awakened inside Zenzele. It was no longer sadness, but a cold, sharp awareness. She got up, washed her face, and prayed. Kneeling on the floor, she didn't weep aloud. She simply asked for strength in silence. Not strength to forgive, but strength to endure and do what she had to do. When she finished her prayer, she didn't go back to bed. She opened her laptop and began to work, typing at a steady pace as if the storm that had just destroyed her life had never happened. When morning arrived, she received a message on her phone. It was from the name that now only provoked disgust. Sterling. Good morning, my angel. Only a little time left until we're together eternally. I love you. Zenzele looked at the message with expressionless eyes. That message, which would have made her smile all day before, now felt like an insult. With cold fingers, she wrote her reply. Good morning, darling. Me too. See you at the venue. She added a heart emoji at the end of the sentence. Her mask was perfectly in place. The office was already bustling with the joyful energy of the wedding. Flowers and congratulatory messages decorated her desk. Colleagues greeted her with big smiles, commenting that she looked radiant despite being busy with preparations. Zenzele responded to all greetings with the kind smile she had rehearsed in front of the mirror that morning. It was a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Shortly after, Talia approached with a cup of the coffee Zenzele liked. Talia's face looked a little tired. She had slight dark circles under her eyes, but she covered them with thick makeup and a forced smile. Congratulations, boss. I'm genuinely happy for you. I hope everything goes perfectly at the wedding tomorrow, she said in the most cheerful voice possible. Zenzele took the coffee. When her fingers intentionally brushed against Talia's hand, Talia seemed startled for a moment. Thank you, Talia. You're a very good person, Zenzele replied. Her voice was soft, but her eyes stared fixedly at Talia's face, as if seeing right through the lie that covered it. Oh, by the way, prepare the final documents for the Project Titan bid before lunchtime. The Chicago client wants final data confirmation today. That instruction was firm and professional, which momentarily disconcerted Talia. Yes, understood. I'll prepare it immediately." Talia hurried back to her desk, relieved that Zenzele didn't seem to suspect anything. She didn't know that her boss's gaze had just been like that of a judge who has already passed sentence. An hour later, Zenzele was not in the office. She had asked permission to step out briefly with the excuse of wedding errands. In reality, she was seated in a private conference room in a different office building. Sitting across from her were her friend and competent lawyer Carmen, and Javier, a trusted director expert in forensic computing. On the screen of the large laptop in front of them were the photos and video Zenzele had taken the night before. Carmen's face flushed with anger, and she tightly clenched her fists. "What trash! We'll cancel everything right now, Zenzele. I'll handle it all. We're going to sue them," Carmen shouted, her voice trembling. Zenzele slowly shook her head. "Not yet, Carmen. It's not enough yet," she replied in a voice so cold it silenced Carmen. "I have a gut feeling that there's something deeper than a simple infidelity. Javier, investigate this, please." Zenzele pointed to the laptop. "Last month, our company lost the Project Titan bid to the competition by an abnormally small margin. I suspected an information leak from the beginning. Trace all digital activity for the last 3 months on Talia's computer and Sterling's email. Look for anything related to Project Titan or the competition." Javier nodded and immediately set to work. His fingers danced frantically over the keyboard, unlocking complex codes and data logs. The air in the room grew tense. Carmen looked worriedly at her friend, who maintained an incredible calm. An hour that seemed eternal finally ended. Javier turned the laptop screen toward Zenzele and Carmen. "Your intuition was correct, boss. Exactly." On the screen were clear, irrefutable digital trails, a path of betrayal far more rotten than they had imagined. There were traces of confidential files with cost analyses and bidding strategies transferred from Talia's computer to a cloud account. A few hours later, those same files were downloaded from the IP address of Sterling's apartment. 3 days later, an email with the same file attached was sent from Sterling's personal email to the director of the competitor company that won the bid. Everything had been exposed. This betrayal was not just a matter of love. It was a crime where the two closest people had trampled on her career, the trust, and the blood, sweat, and tears her team had poured out for months. Zenzele didn't cry. She simply stared at the screen with empty eyes. Then slowly, a faint and chilling smile appeared on her lips, a smile that made Carmen shudder. "Good," Zenzele whispered, like a serpent. "They didn't just take my heart. They tried to steal the result of my efforts. Now it's my turn to take everything from them." Her revenge now had a much greater objective: the family dinner the night before the wedding. Zenzele's last night as a single woman was meant to be filled with sanctity and warmth. Her parents' home, a beautiful colonial house in the Vine City neighborhood, was gorgeously decorated. The aroma of flowers and the smell of lovingly prepared food mingled. Relatives from both families were gathered. Laughter and light conversations filled the space, creating an illusion of perfect happiness. Zenzele sat in the place of honor, dressed in a soft lavender gown. The smile never left her lips. That smile was like a heavy mask glued to her face. Although her cheek muscles were stiff and fatigued, she maintained the expression to perfection. Every time relatives praised her and said how good a couple she and Sterling made, Zenzele simply nodded and thanked them. Inside, she felt as though thousands of blades were stabbing her. She saw her mother, radiant, moving back and forth, making sure guests were comfortable. She also saw her father chatting amiably with Sterling's father. Their laughter was so genuine. Seeing her parents' pure happiness, guilt cut Zenzele's chest like a sharp knife. Tomorrow, she would destroy this happiness. But as the image of Sterling and Talia in the bedroom crossed her mind again, the guilt instantly evaporated, and the flame of vengeance burned brighter. Sterling entered with his parents, carrying the traditional gifts. Sterling looked handsome in an elegant suit that matched his mother's party dress. He approached Zenzele with the most charming smile he could manufacture. In front of everyone, he knelt on one knee, took Zenzele's hand, and kissed it gently. Having you as my wife tomorrow makes me the luckiest man in the whole universe, he whispered, as romantically as possible. The adults around them exclaimed in admiration. Some even dabbed tears of emotion. Zenzele felt Sterling's lips on the back of her hand like a disgusting electric shock. She had to use all her strength to suppress the urge to withdraw her hand abruptly. She smiled even wider and looked deeply into Sterling's eyes. "Tomorrow will be a day you won't forget for the rest of your life, Sterling," she replied. To everyone's ears, it sounded sweet, but only Zenzele knew the cold threat hidden in those words. Sterling, a great actor, took it simply as an overflowing expression of love. Zenzele's plan had to be executed tonight. She had to access Sterling's phone one last time. The opportunity came during the meal. While getting food, she saw Sterling leave his phone on a small side table by the sofa. Just as Zenzele had planned, she got up with a glass of red wine in her hand and walked toward it. Just as she passed by Sterling, she pretended to trip over the edge of the rug and spilled the drink onto Sterling's expensive shirt. "Oh my God, I am so sorry, Sterling. How clumsy of me," Zenzele exclaimed, feigning dismay. The atmosphere stirred slightly. Sterling was surprised and annoyed, but he had to remain calm in front of people. "It's nothing, darling. It's okay," he said, while dabbing at the dark stain. Adults clustered around, worried, offering advice. In the midst of the small confusion Zenzele had created, she acted. Concealing the view of the people with her back, she quickly grabbed Sterling's phone from the table. The hacking application Javier had prepared for her was already ready on her own phone. Through the short-distance sharing function, a single transfer and a hidden installation click were enough. In just 3 seconds that seemed like an eternity, the application was perfectly installed on Sterling's phone without leaving any icon on the screen. She returned the phone to its original place just as Sterling was turning toward the bathroom to clean up. No one noticed what had happened. That night, when all the guests left and the house fell silent again, Zenzele entered her room. Her room was beautifully decorated, and the aroma of relaxing candles floated gently. But to Zenzele, that room felt like a cold prison. Sitting on the edge of the bed, without even changing clothes, she took the earbuds from her purse and put them on. She opened the application on her phone. That application, camouflaged as a normal calculator icon, was actually the control panel for the listening device. She pressed the Activate Ambient Sound Recording button. Instantly, the world of betrayal came vividly to her ears. She heard the sound of a car door closing and then Sterling's complaining voice. "She ruined my expensive shirt with that red wine. Well, tomorrow all her assets will be mine, so I can buy a whole store of suits if I want." Zenzele's heart hardened. Shortly after, Sterling was heard making a call. On the other side, a woman's voice was heard, a voice too familiar, Talia's. "How was the event, honey? Did it end well?" Talia asked in a cooing voice. "It ended well. My performance was brutal. My mother-in-law was thrilled, saying I'm such a romantic." Sterling's arrogant, contemptuous laughter was heard. Zenzele closed her eyes. Her breathing became heavy. "Be careful, Sterling. I'm a little worried. At the office today, the boss's gaze was a little strange. I'm afraid she might have realized something," Talia said anxiously. Sterling's laugh was heard again, this time louder. "Suspicions? Please, Talia. That woman loves me so much she's incapable of suspecting anything. She plays the smart one at work, but when it comes to me, she's blinder than a mole. She thinks I'm Prince Charming. Don't worry, honey. She'll never find out. You focus on our plan. Tomorrow, after we marry, I'll make her sign a power of attorney with the excuse that I need it for the business. In 1 year, I'll put everything in my name, and then we'll divorce with the excuse that she can't have children or something like that. Then we'll go live the good life in Monaco forever. Just hold on a little longer, okay?" Zenzele removed the earbuds and threw them onto the bed. There was no longer any stabbing pain. All that remained was a cold rage that had solidified like a block of ice in her chest. They planned to go beyond betrayal. They planned to mock her feelings, despise her intelligence, and steal the results of her hard work. That night, in the silence of her room, Zenzele didn't shed a single tear. With her eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling, she made her final decision. What they would witness tomorrow would not be a wedding. They would witness a judgment. The dawn of the wedding day was illuminated with a strange gray tone. Due to the rain that had fallen overnight, the air was cold and damp. It seemed that even nature perceived the hidden tragedy. Zenzele's room was warm and bustling. The professional makeup team had arrived at dawn. A famous makeup artist skillfully touched Zenzele's face, and the hairstylist created an elegant bridal style. Amidst the hustle, Zenzele remained seated motionless in front of the large mirror. Her gaze was fixed forward. Her expression was so calm that it seemed unreal. That serenity made the staff wonder. "Oh my goodness, bride, you are the most composed bride I have ever seen," the makeup artist praised her while applying blush. "Usually they are all bundles of nerves. Some even break out in a cold sweat. You are truly serene. You have a different aura." Zenzele responded to the compliment with a faint smile. Serenity? No, this was not serenity. It was concentration. It was the calm of a soldier on the battlefield before their greatest combat. Every time the brush touched her face, she felt as if she were applying camouflage paint for war. Every hairpin holding her hair felt like a piece of armor reinforcing her determination. By 8 o'clock in the morning, the preparation was complete. She looked perfect. A white bridal gown with inlaid crystals elegantly enveloped her body, and the veil covered her impeccable face with an air of mystery. Anyone who saw her would think she was the happiest bride in the world. Her parents entered the room. Their eyes were teary upon seeing the beautiful image of their only daughter. "My daughter, you are all grown up now," her father whispered, his voice trembling as he kissed her forehead. Her mother hugged her tightly. "Be a good wife. You have to take care of each other." The sincere advice cut her heart like a knife. She wanted to scream and tell them the truth right there, but she held back. She hugged her parents tightly, drawing from their embrace the strength to face what was about to happen. When her parents left, Carmen entered the room. She wore a pastel blue guest suit, but her face was rigid with tension. She closed the door with the latch from the inside. "Zenzele, this is the last chance. Are you 100% sure? After this, there's no turning back," Carmen said seriously. Zenzele rose from the chair and walked toward the desk. She opened the laptop. On the screen was an email saved in drafts, ready to be sent. "I have never been more certain in my entire life, Carmen," Zenzele replied without hesitation. She showed Carmen the content of the email. The recipients were a group that included the entire board of directors, senior executives, the human resources director, and the company's legal team. The subject was written in all caps. Urgent notice. Evidence of fraud and leak of company secrets by Sterling Beaumont and Talia Monroe. The attached file contained all the ammunition she had gathered, photos of the infidelity, the 10-second video taken in Sterling's apartment, the audio file of last night's call crudely exposing the dirty plan to loot the company, and most destructive of all, Javier's 20-page forensic computing report. They were proofs of the bid information leak with detailed dates, times, and registered IP addresses. That email was a digital time bomb that would reduce the careers and reputations of Sterling and Talia to ashes. "I'm setting it to automatically send today at 9:15 a.m., Zenzele said, adjusting the scheduled sending time just before the officiant's speech ended and the marriage was declared. Carmen looked at her friend with a mixture of astonishment and respect. The Zenzele she knew was a gentle, generous woman. The woman she had before her now was totally different, a woman so deeply wounded that she had turned into cold steel. "And what will you do after this?" Carmen asked. Zenzele closed the laptop, went back to the mirror, and contemplated her own image. There stood a bride in pure white, ready to wage a war in the mud. "This is not just for personal revenge, Carmen. It is to reclaim my trampled honor. It is to do justice for our team's betrayed effort. And it is to ensure that those monsters with the faces of angels never deceive anyone else again. A knock on the door brought them back to reality. It was time to leave for the venue. Zenzele took a deep breath and picked up the bouquet of white roses from the table. As she opened the door, she put her happy smile back on. Escorted by her family, she walked elegantly down the hallway toward the waiting wedding car, toward the judgment stage, which was perfectly prepared. The luxurious white bridal sedan glided smoothly along the roads of Atlanta. It advanced, parting other cars as if carrying a queen to her palace. Inside the car, sitting next to her father, Zenzele's heart pounded hard, not from bridal emotion, but from the adrenaline of a gladiator entering the arena. She looked at her reflection in the window. Perfect makeup, beautiful dress, everything was a disguise for today. It was a shield to hide the storm raging inside her. Her father squeezed her hand tightly. "Don't be nervous. Dad is here. Everything will be fine." Her father reassured his beloved daughter with a warm smile. Zenzele could only respond with a faint smile and a nod. "No, Dad. After today, nothing will be fine," she whispered to herself. Sitting next to the person she loved most in the world, concealing a secret that would break his heart, she felt like a fraud. But she had gone too far to turn back. Justice had to be served, no matter how high the price. The venue where the wedding was held was one of the most luxurious in Georgia. With high ceilings, sparkling crystal chandeliers, and white floral decorations filling every corner, the grand ballroom looked like a dream garden. Hundreds of guests occupied the seats. Prominent business partners, senior executives, relatives, and friends of both families. Everyone looked happy. They whispered praises for the magnificence of the event and how well Zenzele and Sterling matched. In the front row sat Sterling's large family with proud faces. His mother, famous in high society, launched endless smiles at the guests, as if showing off a trophy of victory. Among the guests, in a not-too-visible seat, was Talia. She wore a very elegant champagne gold dress. Her hair was stylishly pinned up and her makeup was perfect. Sitting with an arrogant posture, she tried to conceal a triumphant smile as she looked toward the altar. From time to time, she glanced at the entrance. She waited impatiently for this wedding drama to end and the second act of her ostentatious life to begin. The majestic music announcing the bride's entrance began to play. All the guests rose in unison and looked toward the entrance. The enormous doors slowly opened. The figure of Zenzele appeared, standing elegantly on her father's arm. Everyone in the hall held their breath. The flashes of the photographers flared, capturing that sacred moment. Zenzele looked so perfect and pure that all present let out exclamations of admiration. She began to walk down the central aisle. Each step was as heavy as walking on broken glass. She felt hundreds of eyes watching her with awe and blessings, but the only thing she felt was emptiness. She displayed the sweetest smile she had practiced all night. She walked with dignity, and her chin held high. Her gaze was fixed straight ahead on the man waiting at the end of the altar, Sterling. Standing next to the officiant, dressed in a white tuxedo that matched Zenzele's dress, he looked incredibly handsome and dignified. His smile was wide and full of relief. His eyes sparkled as he watched Zenzele approach. He thought he had already won. He believed he had secured the ticket to ascend to the highest level by getting the smart and wealthy Zenzele. He did not realize at all that he was looking at the executioner walking elegantly toward the scaffold. Zenzele reached the end of the altar. Her father let go of her hand, kissed her forehead once more, and handed his daughter's hand to Sterling. The moment their skin touched, Zenzele felt a shiver run through her entire body. Looking into Sterling's eyes, she tried to find some trace of the love that once existed, but all she found was a glittering lie. Sterling guided her to her spot. They now stood side by side in front of the officiant, the witnesses, and the parents of both. The ceremony began. The officiant's soft, authoritative voice began to speak about the virtues of marriage. That voice sounded only like an empty buzz in Zenzele's ears. Her mind was not there. She focused only on the large digital clock hanging on the back wall of the hall, visible only to her, 9:13. Her heart pounded faster and faster, pumping cold blood throughout her body. She glanced at the guests who were co-workers. They were all sitting in silence. Some even looked emotional. They did not yet know the storm that would soon hit their cell phones. "Well, now we will proceed to the questions for the declaration of marriage," the officiant said after finishing his speech. He looked alternately at Sterling and Zenzele with a benevolent smile. "Groom Sterling Beaumont and bride Zenzele Martin, are you prepared to swear to this marriage with a sincere heart?" The question resonated in the silent enclosure. Sterling answered with a clear and confident voice. "Yes, I am prepared." His eyes sparkled, looking at Zenzele. He seemed to be saying, "We made it, darling." Now it was Zenzele's turn. All eyes turned to her. They expected the obvious answer, but Zenzele remained silent. She neither nodded nor smiled. She simply stared fixedly at the wall clock. 9:14. There was no expression on her face. Her gaze was empty. An odd, unexpected silence spread like a soft wave, causing bewilderment and confusion among the guests. Sterling began to sense that something was wrong. Very carefully, he gave Zenzele's arm a small tap. "Darling," he whispered worriedly. His smile began to harden. The families in the front row exchanged uneasy glances. "Bride Miss Zenzele," the officiant's voice was heard again. This time, confusion and worry broke the silence. He thought the bride was too nervous, so he showed her a reassuring smile. "Bride, are you prepared?" The question hung in the air once more. It felt much heavier than before. Sterling grew increasingly panicked. He gripped the hand with which he held Zenzele's arm. "Zenzele, what's wrong? Answer me," he whispered again, this time with urgency. The smile had completely vanished from his face, but Zenzele remained silent as if she had gone deaf. She kept looking straight ahead. Her eyes were fixed on the clock's second hand, moving slowly like a countdown to the explosion. 5, 4, 3, 2. The exact moment the long hand pointed to the number 3 and the clock struck 9:15, Zenzele took a deep breath. With a movement so elegant and calm that it was totally unexpected, Zenzele rose from her seat. Everyone in the hall held their breath simultaneously. A murmur was heard from the back. "What's wrong? Is the bride going to faint?" Sterling also stood up and tried to pull Zenzele's arm to make her sit down again. "Zenzele, sit down! Are you trying to embarrass our family?" he growled in a repressed voice. Zenzele broke free from Sterling's hand with an abruptness that surprised everyone. Now, her eyes were no longer empty. The eyes that had seemed tranquil now burned with a cold, sharp flame of anger. Without saying a word, she walked purposefully to the front of the altar and picked up the microphone in front of the officiant. The surprised officiant froze in place, unsure of what to do. The hall, which had been growing noisy, fell back into perfect silence. Everyone sensed that something huge and terrible was about to happen. Zenzele turned to face the hundreds of guests. She scanned the hall with her gaze, the disconcerted faces of her family, Sterling's tense relatives, curious friends. Finally, her gaze stopped and fixed on one point. Talia. Talia was frozen in her chair. Her radiant face had turned pale, and her eyes were wide with terror. She, too, was beginning to realize that this was not the scenario she expected. After staring at Talia for a few seconds, Zenzele turned again to face Sterling, who was petrified by anger and confusion. Zenzele brought the microphone to her mouth. Her clear, calm, and firm voice resonated throughout the hall via the speakers. She let out the first sentence. "I am canceling this wedding." Absolute silence. It seemed as if someone had sucked all the air and sound out of the room. That brief sentence hit the guests like a silent tsunami, leaving everyone pinned to their chairs with their mouths open. Zenzelle's and Sterling's families rose simultaneously, expressions of shock plastered on their faces. "Zenzelle, what are you saying?" her mother cried out in a panic. But Zenzelle ignored the shout. She wasn't finished yet. She continued speaking. This time her voice was slightly louder, sharper, and loaded with intentional emphasis. "I want to express my gratitude to my fiancé, Mr. Sterling Beaumont, and my secretary, Miss Talia Monroe, for giving me a valuable lesson on my last night as a single woman." Zenzelle paused deliberately, letting the name Talia Monroe float in the air. People's eyes began to search for Talia in unison, "for teaching me that loyalty was a luxury neither of you could afford." As she finished the sentence, and before people could process what was happening, the silence was broken. It was not screams or insults. It was a much more chilling sound. It was the sound announcing that Zenzelle's digital bomb had exploded perfectly. Ding, ding, beep. Simultaneously, dozens of email and messaging notifications sounded on the cell phones of the guests. They were Zenzelle's co-workers, executives, and managers from her company. Like a fire alarm sounding in the quiet middle of the night, the sacred atmosphere instantly turned into a scene of digital panic. The people whose phones rang reflexively checked their devices. Their expressions changed in an instant, from bewilderment to surprise, and then, upon reading the email Zenzelle sent, to horror and rage. They saw the photos, read the transcripts, and opened the attached digital audit report. Uncontrollable chaos erupted. Managers looked at each other in disbelief. Department heads murmured, filled with anger. In the midst of that hell, Sterling and Talia also opened their phones. Upon checking the content of the email, Sterling's face turned ashen gray. In just a few seconds, his world collapsed. His career, his reputation, and his future were shattered. His phone began to ring as if it were having a seizure. The name on the screen was that of the company CEO, Mr. Ortega. Across the room, Talia let out a short shriek, like a rat caught in a trap, and under the looks of contempt from those around her, she collapsed to the floor, fainting. On the altar of judgment, Zenzelle watched all the disaster with an expressionless face. Calmly, she took the diamond engagement ring off her ring finger and slowly placed it on the table in front of the still frozen officiant. She turned around and stepped down from the altar, walking past Sterling, who had collapsed with a lost gaze. Her parents, who were in shock, ran to hug her. Without looking back, Zenzelle walked out of the hall, leaving behind the theater stage she herself had destroyed. The doors of the majestic hall closed behind Zenzelle and her family, turning the chaos inside into a distant murmur. The place Zenzelle left behind was like a burning furnace. The guests who had been sitting quietly now stood up and gathered in small groups, looking at their phone screens with serious expressions and whispering. The photographers who aimed to capture happy moments were bewildered. The cameras did not know where to point, unsure of what to photograph in this terrible scene. The sacred wedding venue turned into the eye of the hurricane of a scandal that erupted without warning. Sterling remained kneeling at the altar. He had no strength in his body, as if his bones had melted. The world around him seemed to spin. The murmuring sounded like the buzzing of a distant swarm of bees. He looked at the rings Zenzelle had left on the table. The diamond sparkles seemed to mock his downfall. The phone that had fallen beside him vibrated incessantly. He picked it up with trembling hands. Reproachful messages were raining down from his colleagues, but what made him tremble with fear was the name of the caller, the CEO, Mr. Ortega. Clinging to the little sanity he had left, Sterling pressed the answer button. He didn't even have time to say hello. The voice on the other end of the phone exploded like thunder. "Don't you dare set foot in my company again, Sterling, do you hear me?" Mr. Ortega's normally calm voice was hoarse with anger. It was so loud that some people near Sterling could hear it clearly. "You haven't just embarrassed yourself. You've stained the name of our company. Do you think we are idiots? I have all the evidence in my hand. You and that viper woman." What's her name? Talia Monroe. You are both fired immediately. Tomorrow morning, your termination letters and the lawsuit from the legal team will arrive at your home. Don't even think about contacting anyone in the company. If you do, you'll regret it. The call cut off abruptly. Sterling looked at the phone stunned. Fired. Lawsuit. Everything was over. Dreams, plans, future. Everything evaporated in less than 5 minutes. Sterling's father, who had always been proud of his son, approached with heavy steps. His face, which was previously full of pride, now burned with anger and shame. Without saying a word, his rough palm struck Sterling's cheek. Slap. The sound of the slap echoed in the hall, silencing the murmurs of the people. "You disgrace!" his father spat, trembling with rage. "You have stained our family's face. You ruined the honor I've built for decades for your lust and your greed." His mother ran to stop him, sobbing, "Honey, stop it. People are looking at us." She looked at her son with disbelief. "Sterling, what have you done? What did Zenzeli do to deserve this? How could you be so cruel?" In the midst of the family turmoil, Talia woke up on the other side. No one helped her, so she got up with the help of the catering staff. The first thing she saw when she opened her eyes were dozens of looks of contempt and mockery. She grabbed her phone, hoping it was a dream, but reality was crueler. Text messages of dismissal from Human Resources, messages with insults from her colleagues, and even a message from her landlord asking her to vacate the apartment immediately due to complaints from neighbors, likely alerted by social media. She tried to get up, but her legs failed her. She had to flee from there. Gathering the strength she had left, she staggered and escaped through a side door, ignoring the screams of the entertainment reporters who had smelled blood and were crowding there. The executives and senior officials present did not stay still. They didn't care about a ruined wedding. This was a corporate crisis. Mr. Ortega was talking on the phone with a serious face to someone. "Gather the IT team right now and block all access for Sterling Beaumont and Talia Monroe. Retrieve their laptops and all company assets. Prevent them from destroying evidence. Call the communications team. Prepare an internal statement and a press release for tomorrow morning. We must minimize the damage. Move fast." Unrelated guests shook their heads and left the place one by one, taking with them the story of a dramatic scandal like they had never seen. The wedding hall that looked like heaven was now like hell. The beautiful floral decorations looked withered, and the buffet food remained untouched. All that luxury simply became the ironic backdrop to a collapsed farce. Sterling finally left the place, dragged by his father. Every step he took past the empty chairs was like walking on fire. He had lost everything: love, career, honor, and the respect of his family. Outside the building, Talia managed to flag down a cab with difficulty. As soon as she got into the car, she cried inconsolably, not because she regretted her sins, but because the failure hurt. She had gambled everything and only obtained ruin and shame. The stage was now completely empty. Only the scattered remains of the lie and the betrayal were left. 2 months had passed since the disastrous wedding day. The season had changed, but for Sterling and Talia, the black cloud of that day seemed to remain eternally. Karma acted silently but very systematically. Their scandal spread like wildfire in the sector. It went from being simple gossip to a case study in professional betrayal. The names Sterling Beaumont and Talia Monroe were blacklisted by almost every major company. Every time they sent a resume, the door closed before they even knocked. The headhunters who once tried to recruit Sterling no longer even responded. His reputation had turned to dust and been carried away by the wind. Just as Mr. Ortega warned, the company's legal action began. The lawsuit, as thick as a pillow, claimed millions of dollars in compensation for damages caused by the information leak. The money and bonuses Sterling had saved for years working disappeared instantly to pay the initial lawyer fees. He had to sell his luxury apartment at a loss to cover the litigation. He also had to sell the sports car he used to show off. The two now had no choice but to live together in a narrow, damp basement apartment in the city outskirts. The love and passion they felt when they secretly met in hotels evaporated without a trace amidst the cramped room and accumulated problems. Their days were no longer filled with beautiful future plans, but with fierce fights and reproaches. "This is all your fault. If you had been smarter, we wouldn't have been caught," Sterling shouted frustratedly after receiving a rejection from his second interview. "Me? You were the one who underestimated the boss, Zenzele, and you were greedy. How many times did I tell you that woman was smart? You didn't listen to me." Talia yelled back, not to be outdone, throwing the bowl of instant noodles into the sink. They were trapped in the hell they themselves had created, intertwined by hatred and regret. Conversely, in a high-rise office building downtown, Zenzele's life moved in the opposite direction. After the incident, she took 2 weeks of vacation to recover. When she returned to the company, what greeted her was not pitying glances, but respect and admiration. All employees knew the full story. They did not see her as a poor victim, but as a determined and courageous leader who saved the company from 2 traitors. Mr. Ortega called her aside. He apologized for not having detected the parasites within the company sooner and expressed his gratitude for Zenzele's bravery. As a token of total confidence, the board decided on an extraordinary promotion for Zenzele. She was appointed Vice President of Strategy, the position Sterling had coveted so much. One busy afternoon, Zenzele was walking through the lobby, discussing a new strategy with her secretary. Near the main door, there was a small commotion. 2 security guards were preventing a man from forcibly entering. Zenzele narrowed her eyes. It was Sterling. His appearance had changed greatly. His hair, always perfectly combed, was ruffled. His shirt was dirty, and his face was full of fatigue and desperation. "Please, let me talk to Zenzele for a moment. I beg you," Sterling pleaded with the guards. Through the thick glass door, their gazes met for a moment in the distance. Zenzele stopped. The man who was once going to be her husband. She looked at the man she had loved with all her heart. She could read despair, regret, and supplication on his face, but in Zenzele's heart, there was no longer any hatred or anger, and most importantly, no love either. There was only emptiness, as if she were looking at a stranger she had never seen. Without changing her expression an inch, Zenzele nodded slightly to the guards, a signal for them to continue blocking his passage, and then, as if nothing had happened, she turned around and headed toward the exclusive executive elevator, concentrating on the conversation with her secretary. Sterling had no choice but to stare stunned at Zenzele's back, disappearing behind the closing elevator doors. At that moment, he realized painfully that he had not only lost Zenzele, but he had now become an existence so insignificant that he could not awaken any emotion in her. The article that appeared on the economic news portal that day drove the final nail into Sterling's hope. The headline was clear: Solar Group wins, Project Titan, rebid under VP Zenzele Martin's leadership. It was the project he had tried to steal and sell. The project that caused his ruin had now become the monument to the victory of the woman he betrayed. His downfall literally became the springboard for Zenzele's success. Looking at the city from her new office, Zenzele read the article with a faint smile. It was not a smile of arrogant triumph, but of relief. The chapter of revenge had ended. Justice had been served. Now was the time to build a new castle on the foundations of her strength and integrity, and not on the rubble of the past. 1 year passed. Time flowed like a quiet river, wearing down the sharp edges of memories and turning them into rounded pebbles that no longer hurt. For Zenzele, the last year was like a pilgrimage to find herself. 6 months after the incident, once the legal issues with Sterling and Talia were finalized and the company was stabilized, Zenzele made a decision that surprised everyone. She submitted her resignation. Mr. Ortega jumped. He tried to retain her, offering her a higher position, double the salary, and even stock options. "The company owes you, Zenzele. You are our best asset." Zenzele smiled sincerely. "I have to leave because I love the company, Mr. Ortega. As long as I am here, I will continue to remember the shadows of the past. I want to build something entirely my own on the foundations I laid myself. Finally, Mr. Ortega let her go with a generous severance package and bonuses. Her first step was not a business, but returning home. She spent 1 month at her parents' house, sleeping in her childhood room, eating her mother's food, and spending evenings chatting with her father on the terrace. Instead of trying to forget, she healed her wounds by accepting them. She forgave herself for having been blind with love and shook off the remnants of anger from her heart. Once her soul was whole again, she began to build her castle. She rented a small office and founded Integrity Consulting with 2 employees. The name itself was her principle. Integrity is everything. Her first client was the president of a mid-sized company who had attended her failed wedding. He came to see her and said, "I'm not hiring you because your strategy is excellent, though I know it is. I've seen with my own eyes that you value honor above all else. My company needs those values." Word of mouth spread quickly. Zenzele did not sell empty promises. She sold results based on ethics and transparency. She became a phenomenon in the business world. A young CEO, not only beautiful and intelligent, but with principles as solid as a rock. Requests for lectures at universities and companies poured in. Of course, she did not mention real names, but she spoke about how crisis becomes the catalyst for growth. She was living proof. A queen who fell to the bottom rose again and built her own kingdom. She no longer let trauma define her. She focused on work, took care of her family, and enjoyed small happinesses, morning coffee, weekend reading, short trips with her friend Carmen. She had recovered her old self, but in a much stronger and wiser version. The highlight of her resurrection came 1 year after founding the company. She was invited as the keynote speaker at the Black Business Leaders Forum of America 2024. It was a place where the best CEOs in the country gathered. Zenzele walked onto the stage under the spotlights, dressed in a dark navy suit. She radiated quiet confidence. The topic was resilience, how to turn adversity into your best asset. "Esteemed leaders," she began, "today I will not talk about textbook management theories. I will talk about the most powerful fuel I have discovered in my life. Betrayal." The room held its breath. Betrayal is fire. It can burn you to ashes, or it can forge you like steel into a master sword. The choice is ours. Do not fill the painful void left when trust is broken with a thirst for vengeance. Fill it with principles. Rebuild not with the weak cement of blind faith, but with the pillars of verification, intuition, and integrity. The 20-minute speech was sharp and authentic. She ended with a sentence that made everyone shudder. "In the end, the best revenge is not seeing those who betrayed us fall. It is flying so high that we become so successful that they cease to be visible." A standing ovation erupted. During the networking time after the event, a man approached her. He was a tall man in a well-cut suit and a sharp yet warm gaze. Zenzele recognized him. It was Langston, CEO of an IT company and a panelist at the event. "That was a truly impressive presentation, Ms. Martin." Langston's voice was deep and polite. Zenzele smiled. "Thank you, Mr. Langston." Langston shook his head. "Those are not empty words. Today I did not see data or theory. I saw strength. I was moved not by the fact that you fell, but by the way you rose again. The principles you speak of are something very rare to see in the business world today." It was not a cheap, flirtatious tone. It contained pure respect and professional sympathy. That night, their conversation flowed naturally from business to life philosophy and hobbies. Zenzele felt like she was talking to a masculine version of herself, someone who valued essence over appearances. At that luxurious corporate event, the seed of a new connection, free of lies, began to sprout. 3 years later, the sky over Atlanta was unusually clear and blue. In a corner office, glazed on an iconic building in the financial district, Zenzele presided over a board meeting. Integrity. Consulting was no longer a small office. It had grown to become one of the most important consulting firms in the southeastern United States, occupying 3 floors. Employees had grown from 2 to 200 experts. Dressed in an emerald silk blouse, Zenzele conducted the meeting with her characteristic quiet and sharp charisma. She was no longer building a castle, she was building an empire. Her personal life also found perfect harmony. Zenzele and Langston celebrated a simple but solemn wedding 2 years ago, inviting only close family and friends. They were lovers and the best partners. There were always interesting debates at the breakfast table. Langston was not jealous of Zenzele's success. On the contrary, he was her greatest supporter. A home where they respected and trusted each other, and the laughter never ceased. That was proof that true love existed. That day, to celebrate the award of a major project, Zenzele and Langston ate at a high-end restaurant on the top floor of Zenzele's company building. It was a place with a 360-degree panoramic view. While enjoying dessert, Zenzele's gaze accidentally drifted toward the lobby entrance on the ground floor. Amidst the hustle of luxury cars coming and going, she saw a familiar silhouette, a parking valet, bowing, dressed in a faded maroon uniform. It was Sterling. He seemed to have lost weight and looked smaller. His back was hunched, and his smile toward customers looked servile and exhausted. Zenzele looked at him expressionlessly. Shortly after, a delivery motorcycle stopped nearby. A woman in a faded jacket got off and approached Sterling with a bag of food. It was Talia. Beneath the thick but cheap makeup, the fatigue was noticeable. She handed the food to Sterling with an unfriendly face. Just by watching their gestures, one could tell the conversation between them was not pleasant. At that moment, perhaps feeling someone's gaze, Sterling lifted his head. It's unknown how he found her among so many glass windows, but for a very brief instant, barely 2 seconds, Sterling's eyes met Zenzele's. Even at that distance, Zenzele could see everything. Surprise, burning shame, deep regret, and the heartbreaking recognition of his own defeat. Langston, sensing his wife's gaze had shifted, also looked down. "Who is that?" he asked softly, although he suspected. Zenzele looked away and looked at her husband. In her eyes there were no longer any remnants of emotions related to them. There was only serenity. She smiled, looking down. It was not a mockery, but a faint, sincere smile. "You no longer have any power over me. I hope you find peace in your own way." It was the final period in the chapter of the past. "It's no one, darling, just part of the city landscape," she replied softly. Langston smiled as if he understood and took her hand. Zenzele laughed aloud at her husband's joke. Zenzele's best revenge was not seeing them miserable. It was her complete happiness enjoyed from that height. Their existence was now nothing more than a speck of dust carried by the wind. 10 years is a long time. Enough time to change a city, change a government, and allow deep wounds to heal, leaving only a silver scar, a quiet and beautiful home in the Alpharetta suburbs of Atlanta. The sunset stained the sky violet. In the well-maintained backyard, a 5-year-old girl let out laughter like tiny bells as she ran, chasing fireflies. Her name was Alba, Dawn, literally the only light in Zenzele and Langston's life. Zenzele sat on the terrace, drinking hot tea. She was without makeup but exuded a peace and happiness that no luxury item could buy. Langston came out with a thin blanket and covered Zenzele's shoulders. He sat next to his wife, hugged her shoulders, and they looked together at the most precious landscape in the world, their laughing daughter. Zenzele's life found the most beautiful rhythm. Integrity. Consulting had become a regional giant, but Zenzele had retreated from the management frontline and only held the position of board chair. Her focus had changed. 3 years ago, she founded the Beacon of Hope Foundation. It was a nonprofit organization that provided legal support and seed funding to women whose careers had been truncated or whose businesses had failed due to scams or betrayals. She converted the pain of the past into a lighthouse for others. She proved that even among the ruins, a fortress can be built for someone. She never told her detailed story publicly, but those who received help could know. That deep empathy could only be given by someone who had personally traversed the darkness. On the other side of the same city, under a street lamp that didn't go out, an old compact car stopped. The driver turned off the rideshare app. It was the end of a long shift. It was Sterling. In his early 40s, his hair was starting to thin, and fatigue had etched deep wrinkles around his eyes and mouth. The vigor of yesteryear had disappeared, leaving only the empty gaze of a man who had surrendered to fate. He was fired, ruined by the lawsuit, and his relationship with Talia ended with mutual blame amidst poverty. Talia left one morning, leaving only a note filled with insults. Since then, Sterling's life has been an endless struggle. Now, he survived by driving for a local rideshare service, a job that allowed him to remain anonymous in the city he once wanted to conquer. Every day, as he drove past the forest of buildings where his former colleagues worked, he suffered silent torture. The regret was no longer about money or status. It was a heartbreaking regret for his own stupidity and greed, for throwing away the one true jewel of his life, Zenzele. One afternoon, he got a service request. The pickup location was the Integrity Tower. Sterling's heart sank. The whole city knew whose building that was. He wanted to cancel, but he needed money to pay the rent. With trembling hands, he gripped the steering wheel and headed toward that majestic building. The passenger was not Zenzele. It was a young employee with a cheerful expression. Throughout the ride, she talked on the phone with a friend. "Yes, it's amazing. Today, Chairwoman Zenzele came to our department. Wow, she really is a great person. She has an impressive aura. She said, 'Effort is important, but honesty is vital.' I think I was very lucky to get hired here." Sterling gripped the steering wheel tightly. The name of the woman he tried to destroy was now being spoken with respect and praise. He felt like an invisible ghost. Driving over the remnants of his lost life, he heard the echo of the world he could have had. He dropped off the client and pulled the car over to the side of the street. He looked at the Integrity Tower shining in the distance. At the summit was a life full of light, and he was trapped in the dark bottom. For the first time in 10 years, Sterling cried. They were the silent tears of a man who fully realized what he had thrown away. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away in a small provincial town, Talia worked as an administrative assistant in a textile factory. She left Sterling and tried to rebuild her life in New York, but her bad reputation followed her like a label. In the end, swallowing her pride, she returned to her hometown. She could not even dream of a luxurious life. That night, checking social media in her cramped rental apartment, she found an article, "The 50 Most Influential Women in America." At the top was a photo of Zenzele with a calm and dignified smile. Talia stared at the screen, stunned. She didn't even feel jealousy, just a deep fatigue in her soul. She was nothing more than a spectator in the last row, watching the success of the woman she betrayed. Her prison was not concrete walls, but a miserable life lived permanently in the shadow of that woman's radiance. Back on Zenzele's terrace, Alba had fallen asleep in Langston's lap. "Sometimes, I think," Zenzele whispered, as if talking to herself. "If that day hadn't happened, if there hadn't been that betrayal, would I be here now? Would I have met you? Would I have had Alba? And would I be enjoying this peace?" Langston nodded, looking at his wife's face, illuminated by the moonlight. "Perhaps not. But fate is curious. Through the most terrible storms, it leads us to the correct harbor." Zenzele smiled with sincere gratitude. She looked at the stars in the night sky. The past was no longer a tragedy. It was a painful process of refinement. It was the purifying fire that burned away the lie and left only her truest self. Sterling and Talia's betrayal was not the end of the story, but the harsh and cruel prologue necessary to reach the most beautiful chapter. Under the starlight, surrounded by true love, Zenzele felt complete. She did not win by destroying her enemies. Her complete happiness enjoyed from that height was her victory. Did you like the story, and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.